Hey, good morning, everyone. Welcome to today's edition of our 2026 Crops Winter Webinar Series. Today, our topic is on the 2025 Saskatchewan Insect and Pest Disease Update. My name is Rebecca Hort, and I am the Crops Extension Specialist with the Saskatchewan Ministry of Agriculture for the Humboldt region, and I'll be chairing this morning's event. CEUs are being offered for CCAs on this webinar. In order to get credit, you must attend the entire live event. There will be a QR code at the end of the presentation to collect credit. If you missed the code and have attended live, please email us afterwards and we can work with you to get your credit. But before we start with the formal presentation, I have a few items to share. Our Crops Extension Specialists put on this webinar series each year. We work out of 10 different offices across the province. Each office contains a wide variety of specialists that can help you with any agriculture-based question. To connect with our specialists, please call your local regional office or the Ag Knowledge Center at the number provided. There are 8 AgriArm sites located throughout the province that are dedicated to bringing the industry Saskatchewan-specific information and demonstrations on new and existing agricultural practices. If you're interested in learning more, please follow the QR code on the screen. If you have ever heard the words on the radio, Saskatchewan is 98% completed harvest this week, then you have likely heard of the crop report. My colleagues write the crop report each week during the growing season based on data collected from crop reporters across the province. I would like to thank all our current crop reporters for helping us achieve this comprehensive report. I'd also like to invite any new crop reporters to sign up. Please use the QR code to sign up today. I also want to mention that the 2026 Crop Diagnostics School will be at Swift Current this year on July 29th and 30th. More details are coming soon on this event, along with some other upcoming field days hosted by local AgriArm research sites. Please note our upcoming schedule of winter crops webinars, but another webinar series you may be interested in is brought to you by the Range Management Specialists and Agri-Environmental Specialists. It is the Weed Management webinar series. Register today on our website at the Sask Ag Events calendar. Lastly, we want to make sure everyone is aware of the funding available through the Sustainable Canadian Agricultural Partnership. You can reach out to your local agriculture program specialist to find out what funding you may qualify for. Along with this information, we have additional resources for everyone under our handout section in the chat box area of the toolbar. These will be shared along with the recording after the webinar is complete. After each presentation today, we will have a live Q&A with our 3 provincial specialists on their respective presentations. The main hub today will be your webinar screen, and as mentioned, we will share relevant downloadable handouts with you in the chat box area. The entire session will be recorded, so if you miss anything or wish to revisit any of the presentations, you'll be able to. Recording links will be sent out later this week in a follow-up email. An evaluation will pop up at the end of this webinar this morning. Please ensure that you fill out the evaluation, as this helps us determine what topics you want to learn more about and help us prioritize research needs for the future. We have a few housekeeping notes to keep in mind during the webinar. If anybody has any questions during any of the presentations, you may type them in the question box in the top right-hand side of the control panel. We will try to get to as many questions as possible. Your question will remain anonymous and will only be sent to myself. During the presentation, you'll be muted so that we can ensure there's no feedback that will interfere with the audio. Now let's get started. So we have 3 speakers for you today, and our first speaker will be Dr. James Tansey, who has been the provincial entomologist with the Ministry of Agriculture since January 2018. Prior to this, he worked as a research scientist with ALK in Post Falls, Idaho, investigating and optimizing industrial production and allergen expression in house dust mites. He came to Idaho from a postdoctoral fellowship at the University of Florida, where he investigated control of the Asian citrus physolid and other citrus pests. His doctoral research and first postdoc focused on canola entomology in the Dawsdahl Lab at the University of Alberta, primarily host plant resistance to some major insect pests of canola and novel germplasm. His master's degree examined insect-plant interactions in an important leafy spurge biological control agent. We'll start whenever you're ready, James.
Thanks, Rebecca. Okay, my camera actually worked. I'll need to share my screen. Thank you. Okay, how's that look?
Looks good.
Okay, thank you. Okay, let's get right into this. So grasshoppers, of course, a bit of a preeminent pest in Western Canada or the Great Plains of North America. Yeah, they have been described as the most important herbivores in grassland systems. Full stop. So that's barring anything, including buffalo. So overall, populations were much reduced this year, and compared to last year. Last year we had some regions of pretty significant pressure. This year, the areas that were affected were relatively more restricted. There were some regional issues, however, with some reports of faba seedlings being munched in the Tisdale region. Cereals in canola and West Central were damaged as well. Two-striped grasshopper has been the dominant species in recent years. And curiously enough, it seems to have faded from a position of dominance. We still had regional hotspots of two-striped grasshopper, but they were nowhere near as important as they have been in recent years. So just a quick look at our 4 primary pest species. Starting at the top, this is clear-winged grasshopper, a relatively small grasshopper. Females are larger than males in the case of grasshoppers, and in this one, in this species, females are about 1 inch long. So they're relatively smaller grasshoppers than some of the other species, although they certainly compensate for that with numbers in some cases. So really characteristic camouflage pattern on their forewing that you can see there. And they are gramnivores. Pardon me, tripping over my words. Which means they feed preferentially on grasses. They will feed on other host plants or other potential host plants as well, but given a choice, they will feed on grasses like cereals. Migratory grasshopper has a very broad host range, has been described as ambivorous, so it's ambivalent about what it likes to eat. With one important caveat. So the asterisk for this one is kochia. They do not like the Chenopodiaceae very much and will not feed on kochia, of course. So yeah, they will actually strip the paint off of outbuildings, but they won't eat kochia. Packard's grasshopper is the next species. This is one of the largest of the bunch. So females could be almost 1.5 inches long. And relatively robust animal. Also considered to be an ambivore, so very broad host range. This one's demonstrated a predilection for legumes, though, so Fabaceae, pulse crops and alfalfa and clover. So can be obviously very problematic in sensitive crops like lentil. And finally, two-striped grasshopper. This is the largest of the bunch. Again, females can be 1.5 inches long. And this one, although it is broadly generalist, it does prefer broadleaf plants. So given a choice, it would happily or it would prefer to feed on broadleaf plants than cereals, though it will feed on cereals on occasion. So once again, two-stripe has been historically the most important species in Saskatchewan, or at least in recently historically, really faded from a position of dominance recently. These were replaced in some regions, particularly the Southwest, by migratory, by clear-winged grasshopper, and by Packards. And in some cases, a Melanopus foetus, which is very difficult to tell apart from Packards, both as an infant, as an adult. You really need to tease the male naughty bits out and get them under a microscope to be able to tell the species apart. So that's what you got to do. So marsh meadow grasshopper was also prevalent on many central sites, and this is one of the slant-faced grasshoppers. No accounts that I'm aware of damage associated with that species, though. Although they were very numerous. So SCIC, tip of the hat to SCIC, conducts the grasshopper survey every year, and they looked at 1,149 sites throughout the province in July to September. Heavy population, so that is over the nominal economic threshold of 10 per square meter, and that applies to most crops. Some crops are more sensitive, like lentils, like flax, 2 per square meter in both of those for lentils when they're in flower and flax when they're in boll. Both those crops are very sensitive to grasshopper damage at those stages. So differences in the economic thresholds associated with those, but limited populations, and that 10 per square meter only described in about 8 sites. So looking at the map, you can see this is 2024 versus 2025, and yeah, a real restriction or a real reduction in the area affected. Still had some hot spots though. So Never count grasshoppers out completely. Remains to be seen what's going to happen this current year. Of course, we came out of a cool, wet period with La Nina last year, and of course that event is now terminated. So if we're looking at hot, dry conditions again this spring, we could see a resurgence in grasshopper populations. Stay tuned. Cereal pests. One of our more economically damaging cereal pests is wheat midge, and because of that, we conduct surveys on this one. So we do a provincial survey of soil cores to look at viable pupae. They pupate in the soil, and when I say viable, if you take a look at the top right there, that is a parasitoid called Macrogleanes penetrans, and it is a specialist parasitoid of wheat midge. And can have a pretty significant impact on populations. So when our surveyor looks at those soil cores, she evaluates the viability of them. So whether they're parasitized or not. If they're not parasitized, they have obviously have a much better chance of making it through to adulthood the next year or in following years. If they are parasitized, they're considered toast, so no longer viable. So there is also, and I'll show you in an upcoming slide, some pheromone monitoring that occurs with this as part of the Midge Busters project as well. So we had no reports of spraying for these animals. Rainfall is tremendously important for them. So they need about more than 25 millimeters of precipitation by the end of May for normal emergence. Once again, they do pupate in the soil, and they can hunker down under suboptimal conditions. If it's too dry, they can hunker down there for years, waiting for those rains in May. It seems that a large rainfall event really stimulates them to complete their development and emerge that year. And once again, they can hunker down for years. So once again, no reports of spraying this year. There were some grading issues reported from Southwest Saskatchewan. As it turns out, that was not wheat midge associated. I apologize. I don't remember what the cause was, but it was not associated with wheat midge. This indicates the survey samples are currently being processed. They have been processed, and we've got a map for you right off hot off the presses. So this is the wheat. This is Midge Busters pheromone monitoring. So this is a program that's led by Tyler Wist with Ag Canada. You can see here very dry conditions in the spring. We didn't get those. Didn't get that substantial rainfall that was required for large emergence, and this resulted in relatively poor trap catches of wheat midge throughout the province. Oh, pardon me. I don't have the provincial map in here. Apologize for that. I will try to provide that by the end of the presentation. It's up on the industry website too. So if you get a chance, just do a Google search for Saskatchewan wheat midge. Should be one of the first things that pops up. The next one we'll talk about is Hessian fly. This is an animal that has increased in prevalence, or reports of damage consistent with Hessian fly have increased in prevalence, and we've been getting reports and seen these pupae, or what are called flaxseed stage. It looks, superficially a little like a flaxseed, which is why the name, but it is a fly puparium. So this midge overwinters in this stage, and can be found in the interface between the stem and the leaf, which is where they hunker down and feed. You can see that there is a little parasitic wasp up here as well, and we'll talk briefly about that in an upcoming slide. So just a quick description of these animals. This is Hessian fly, male on the top, female on the bottom. They can have this orange coloration when they're gravid, or that is full of eggs. Little look at the naughty bits again. We always seem to come back to bug naughty bits. So males have claspers, and I think you can probably guess what those are for clasping. And that's the female with her characteristic ovipositor or egg depositor. So 1 to 4 days they are active as adults. They live about a month as larvae. They pupate, but adult activity is very, very short and sharp. So they need to get up and in numbers mate and get those eggs onto host plants. So egg to adult, again, in about a month. All depends on temperature. So it's going to be a little slower at cool temperatures, and these animals are pretty cold tolerant. It's going to be a little quicker at high temperatures and really fades when it's quite hot. So they can engage what's called in what's called estivation when conditions are very hot and dry. So that is, they'll just hunker down in a delayed diapause stage. So that is an arrested development stage in the summertime if things are very hot and dry. And they can delay their diapause as well for years. So that is hunker down for years if conditions are poor. Eggs, 250 to 300 per female. This leaf that's pictured here is really heavy by egg-laying standards. Typically, that's going to be in on the leaf surface in groups of 2 to 15, and has to do with resource partitioning. You don't want too many to be sharing the same resources. If you're a female Hessian fly, I'm not, that I'm aware. So larvae hatch in about 3 to 10 days, and again, that's temperature dependent. 12 to 24 hours to move to the feeding sites, and that's that. Those will be those lower nodes. There are 3 larval instars, and that last instar is going to pupate in the exoskeleton, in the cast exuvium of that second instar. So you see the 3 with the tick there. The tick is just shorthand for instar. So if you do come across that in this context, that's what's being discussed there. So photo of the larva, the puparia once they've darkened off, and some eggs. So 1 to 2 generations in the northern Great Plains. So there's what are called the spring and fall broods, and again, you can have estivation in the midsummer as well, and delay in the development and emergence of adults. In southern parts of their range in Texas and the Carolinas, you can get 3 to 6 generations. Typically in that part of the world, there's a lot more winter wheat grown, and that is the primary host. In the U.S. Pacific Northwest and the Dakotas, on the prairies in Canada, they've adjusted their phenology to take advantage of spring wheat. So spring wheat is the primary host in this part of the world. So larvae overwinter in puparia, as I mentioned, on plants in winter wheat, also considered to be a residue-borne pest, and they can actually hunker down in the soil on the stem as well. And I mentioned estivation already, so no need to talk about that anymore. Adult eclosion or emergence in the spring. Pardon me, I had a tickle in my throat. So once I mentioned they're pretty cold tolerant, so they need 1.6 degrees Celsius to get moving and start their development. So 343 degree days base, 1.6 Celsius. That puts it at typically early mid-May for when adults are coming up in this part of the world. And so that was based on some modeling that was done from North Dakota population. So they should share some great similarity to ours. So from stubble, alternate hosts, and there are a large number of alternate hosts. And once again, the adults are going to be living for 1 to 4 days. Larvae damage the stem by feeding on it. And you can see the 2 little arrows there, those little hooks associated with the mandibles of the larvae, and they're using that to scrape the surface and get the plant to leak essentially, and they take up that fluid. This can result in stunting of seedlings. So if you're looking down a row and you've got, a series of plants that are obviously stunted, this is one thing that can contribute to that. The major issue for the prairies, however, is stem weakening, and typically above that second node. So if you get a plant that breaks off and you got lodging and is associated with that second node, look for those flaxseed puparia. That'll be really, really characteristic of that damage. We have seen an upregulation in the lodging associated with that in 2022 and 2023 in central regions, South Saskatchewan, and Southeast Alberta. So in 2024, we had anecdotal accounts of significant lodging as well. We didn't get any puparia submitted to the lab, if you do come across it, please submit puparia, and I'll give you a good indication as to why. So Hessian fly has not been a significant issue on the prairies for some time, and the connection between populations and damage does not seem to be A to B either. So there are a lot of factors that are involved, but we have seen an upregulation in lodging associated with this. So this is the first account since 2014 reported in the West oh darn it, what the heck is it called? Western Forum on Pest Management. Geez, that should be tip of tongue, shouldn't it? Anyway, Western Foremount Pest Management produces reports every year, and the last report to indicate Hessian fly as any sort of issue was 2014 in Saskatchewan in the Tisdale region, and prior to that was 2010 in southern Alberta. So we're getting reports every year now. So because of that, we took it upon ourselves to start monitoring for this one. And thanks very much to Boyd Morey and Lab and Amanda Jorgensen, John Gavlosky, Carter Prue, Tyler Wist, and myself. We initiated a monitoring project on this one, and we had buy-in from several of our regional specialists. So please give them a tip of the hat too. So, so Coven Stonehouse, Massich, and our SARM PHTA, Mahoniak, Grace Onu, and my summer student, Faith Hillsden. So a lot of moving parts on this one. Boyd ponied up the money to purchase the pheromone lures and the traps, and these are commercially available and follow what's called the Anderson recipe. So this was some work once again done with the northern Great Plains populations to determine what the pheromone mix is to attract them. Use Jackson traps, which look a whole lot like Delta traps. They are basically Delta traps with a little lip on them. 10 sites per province, 2 traps per field. And these are the results of that. You can see southern Manitoba has very heavy populations in some cases. You can see average trap count here was in the range of 2,500 per trap on one site. So really, really large populations in that area. We had moderate populations in parts of Saskatchewan and some parts of Alberta as well. The rub is there is no economic threshold for this animal. No products are registered for it. The only thing you can do is crop rotation if you've suffered damage. They're not terrific flyers, so crop rotation can be effective, and resistant germplasm. Unfortunately, there is no resistant germplasm registered in Canada at this time. However, resistant germplasm has been the subject of considerable research in the past, and there are modes of action that are available. So parasitoid wasps. I did mention the parasitoid in a previous slide, and that's that happy little wasp lady there. So tiny little fart of a wasp. That animal's actually less than a millimeter long, or about a millimeter long. I haven't identified it to species, but it is not one of the usual suspects. 41 species in Europe and North America have been described for Hessian fly. Hessian fly is considered to be one of the worst cereal pests worldwide, and that's wherever wheat is grown. It's considered cosmopolitan now, so worldwide. In Washington state, parasitoids can have a significant impact on populations with up to 98% parasitism. In Idaho, 3 major species have been described. In Alberta, Saskatchewan, it's primarily Pediobius, which this animal is not. So this is not the species. Manitoba, 10 species have been described, and pretty heavy levels of parasitism can occur as well. So from the puparia that were submitted to myself at the Crop Protection Lab and to Dr. Wist at Canada, we reared out parasitoids from these, and in 2 years I got 2 parasitoids, and in 2 years Tyler got 1. So the levels of parasitism in these populations are very low right now, and we suspect that the regulating impact of these parasitoids may be escaping Hessian fly populations, which is why we could be seeing an upregulation in their populations. Okay, weed stem sawfly. We monitor, and this is another survey that is conducted by a contractor and funded by Sask Wheat and SCIC, and thanks very much to them for funding this work. I should mention as well, the wheat midge survey is also funded by Sask Wheat and SCIC, and once again, sincere thanks to those organizations for funding that work. So 3rd year of the annual survey for wheat stem sawfly. Once again, this is a contractor survey. Although this year I participated and Grace participated in the survey as well. to bolster the amount of data that was collected. So we extended the survey a little bit further north in the Regina region, and we had reports of heavy cutting near Regina. One field that I visited had really heavy cutting. Every stem that I cut had a larva inside and looked healthy. Other sites less so. We saw high levels of parasitism. We saw high levels of dead sawfly larvae in stems, including some that were killed by a fusarium species. So if you cut a stem open and you see bright pink fuzzy stuff where the larva should be, that's a fusarium species. There are actually 5 fusarium species that attack Hessian fly and can regulate its populations. So one to watch for again. So these are the results of the survey. This is from 2024 on the left and 2025 on the right. So you can see populations have diminished. We still have some hotspots, of course, and we will. The plan is to keep looking for this animal and keep this survey going. So another animal not subject to survey, but we had reports of were thrips, barley thrips in particular. And we had some damage in barley and durum mid to late July in the Waukon, Saskatchewan regions. Thresholds are established for barley, and these are typically 7 to 8 thrips per stem, although these will vary based on commodity price and control product price, but typically 7 to 8 thrips per stem. Before heading is complete. Once heading is complete, they're, I don't want to say impervious, but they're very tolerant of thrips damage at that stage, and you're likely not going to see a yield hit. So I did mention thresholds are established for barley. Reliable thresholds for other cereals are required for North American populations. A lot of this work was done in the Mediterranean region in Greece. Excellent work, but a very different climate than what we experience here. And reliable thresholds still require development for other cereals in North America. This was a weirdie. This was reported in the Kindersley area. This is brown wheat mite. You typically hear of this more in Texas than you do on the Canadian prairies where it's hot and dry. Of course, the Kindersley area was hot and dry, and the crop was not doing very well. And in addition to the stunting associated with poor growing conditions, it suffered a pretty significant impact of brown wheat mite. They respond differently than insects do to specific insecticides, although there are products registered for their control. The best thing for them is rain, and happily that region received a pretty heavy rain, and the issue with the mites disappeared along with the mites. Another weirdie that came to the fore this year, we had multiple reports in barley and wheat north of Saskatoon of this little agromycid leaf miner. You can see the puparia on the puparium, pardon me, on the leaf. That's pretty typical of what you see with leaf symptoms, which obviously can be mistaken for a number of other things, but very conspicuous if you see this puparium or the larvae tunneling through the leaf. Puparia were submitted to a crop protection lab for rearing, and no parasitoids were found. So what's happening with this animal, we're going to keep an eye out for it as well. We don't have a formal survey for it, but keep your eyes open for leaf mining and cereals. Typically not economically damaging in most of its range. It's another cosmopolitan pest, but there is the potential for economic damage. So keep an eye out for this. Normally controlled really well in European Union or European countries by parasitoids, and as I mentioned before, we didn't manage to get any parasitoids out of these ones. Really broad host range as well. So in North American populations, a number of different grass genera, including corn. So one we'll continue to look for. Another weirdie. It was a bit of a year of the weirdies. You get wet, warm, dry conditions, and a lot of weirdos come out of the woodwork. This is a Rhiparochromid. So it's a member of the family Rhiparochromidae, or the dirt-colored seed bugs. And you say, hey, that thing's bright red. It's not dirt-colored at all. The adults, you know, they look they a little bit soil-colored. Unfortunately, I don't have a photo of that one. But yeah, the conspicuous stage, the one you're going to see, are going to be these nymphs, and you'll see them on the soil, typically in numbers like this. You know, if you see 20, you probably got about 1,000. So yeah, they're very numerous under the soil surface. Piercing, sucking feeders feeding on the on the plant below the soil surface and causing significant wilting and damage to these plants. They have very broad host range. It seems there's very little they won't feed on where they occur, and they can be very difficult to control because they're under the soil surface. So if you see a scene like this with the animals moving on the surface, and they're very active, so they move very quickly, stick your hand in that soil, scoop up as much as that as you can get, and you will pull out, just this mess of red bugs just squirming all over the place and running. They can be, again, very numerous underneath the soil surface. We had reports this year in early June under the dry conditions from the Kindersley region and for wheat. And in that case, the grower and agronomist tried dimethoate for it. I should indicate too, there are no products registered for its control. Pardon me. So over the years, a number of different individuals have tried a number of different chemistries, and the results are always mixed. In this case, dimethoate, that is Lagon, Saigon, did not reduce the population numbers. It seemed to cause the feeding to stop and the damage to stop, but it didn't remove the population. What did was the arrival of field crickets after the insecticide application, which seemed to clean up this red bug outbreak. We also had a report of alfalfa near Earl Grey being heavily damaged, and canola near Plenty. And in the case of that canola field, they had really heavily damaged, about 20 acres, and this increased to 40 acres within about 48 hours after the application of insecticide. So the insecticide was not efficacious for this one. Still looking for proper solutions to this, and it's very much a case-by-case action for the species. Happily, not much of a flea beetle year, although we did have some regional populations. Every year you're going to get some issues with flea beetles, but provincially, not major issues with these species. Straight flea beetle is still dominant, or pardon me, crucifer flea beetle is still dominant in the southern regions. It likes it warmer and drier. Straight flea beetle likes it a little cooler and wetter. Straight flea beetle has a slightly broader host range and is more tolerant of insecticides, which is, can be a problem. We happily, however, we had, very few reports of significant damage associated with flea beetles, either species. And this from the crop report. Rebecca mentioned the crop report before, and you can see here, very low incidence of significant flea beetle damage. Diamondback moth is another one that we continue to survey for. These are migratory adults. So that is, they're feeding on winter crops in Florida, Texas, northern Mexico. And once those winter crops are ready to harvest in the spring, they're going to take flight. They no longer have numerous host plants, so they got to get out of Dodge to get host plants. And they are migratory in other parts of the world. So we have a migratory population now established in North America, well established. There is an Asian population, and there's a European population. European population overwinters in Africa and then migrates back to European locations, and similarly for the Asian population. So three major populations, all the same species. In the case of North America, they're flying up from Florida and Texas, and they're moving on high altitude winds. So they're taking advantage of the same factors that are helping migratory birds move along. So, there's some discussion about them moving along the same flyways, and it does make sense. And of course, in Saskatchewan here, we're typically on the central flyway, although there is a little bit of overlap with prevailing winds. So these animals are going to take flight. They're going to move to about 300 to 500 meters, typically following where the air is a little bit warmer, and just maintaining their position in the air column, letting those winds push them along. And the winds can push them along at about 1,000 kilometers a day. So they can, for an animal that's not a powerful flyer, it can really get around. So we do monitor for this one. We had 61 traps this past year, began to capture early May, which is pretty normal. Numbers increased till late June, and happily numbers were low. So you can see the average diamondback moth per trap per week And even at the height of populations, the numbers were on average about 6 per trap, so very low. Do not use the local catches as an indication of local pressure. What we're looking at is time of arrival, which gives us an estimate of the potential for regional problems and regional numbers, and more importantly, the potential for population increase, especially if we have warm conditions. So we had only one site with that caught more than 300, and that's cumulative catch. So that's over the course of the whole season, and so numbers were low. So we're going to continue to monitor for this. This can be a really damaging pest when it arrives in numbers. Cabbage seed pod weevil. It was certainly year of the weevil, amongst some other factors as well. Cabbage seed pod weevil can damage both as an adult and as a larva, and you see them both pictured here. The adults really like to feed on canola buds when they're just beginning to bud. And will move into the crop in big numbers when flowering starts. So that's the best time to control them, is that 10 to 20% flowering, and the economic threshold 2.5 to 4 per sweep. So you want to hit them, and if you're seeing that threshold, the threshold may seem relatively low, and reason being is they are very fecund. These girls, they make a lot of eggs. So 200, 250 eggs per female. What she's going to do is, with that long rostrum, she's got, we'll say regular insect mouthparts on the end of that, and she's going to chew a hole in the developing pod when it's about half an inch long. She's going to turn around, lay a single egg in there, deposit what's called an oviposition deterring pheromone. So that's a warning sign to other females not to lay an egg in there. Reason being, they're cannibals. And you can see a relatively large larva living inside a canola pod there. They're terrible at sharing. So, if you're a fan of 80s movies, there can be only one. And of course, she advertises this. So what this means is that an individual female can impact 250 pods. So that can be problematic, and that's why the threshold is relatively low on this one. Very, very numerous this year, many reports of spraying, and they were showing up in numbers in regions where they either didn't occur last year or were at very low levels. And there is some indication, there's some speculation as to, and it is speculation at this point, is how they arrived in these different regions. One thought is the potential for mass flight, which hasn't been documented in the species. I'm not going to rule it out, but it hasn't been reported in the species. Another one is the potential for them to be carried by storms. So we had significant storms in the southwest that coincided with the emergence of adults in the spring, and many reports of tornadoes associated with that. Of course, tornadoes can pick up a lot of stuff and send it airborne, and there's potential that these storms tracking north and east could have carried some of the, large numbers of these weevils and deposited them throughout the province and into Manitoba. So this is what the damage looks like. And you can see here that's an exit hole. So in addition to the entry hole, there's also an exit hole. That larva is going to complete 3 instars and then chew its way out to pupate in the soil. So you crack it open. Both those openings can be avenues for pathogens to enter. And you can see here there's a bit of fungal growth in here. So in addition to the direct damage caused by the larvae, you can get secondary damage by pathogens, and this can contribute to shattering as well. It also seemed that canola flower midge like to take advantage of pods that were influenced by cabbage seed pod weevil. I don't think this was a co-occurrence. Once again, cabbage seed pod weevil is a pretty notorious cannibal, and I suspect it would probably happily munch on midge larvae as well. I suspect these midge larvae took advantage of an opening in a pod after the weevil larva had vacated. However, there they are, and were relatively frequently reported in these situations. So these are what the populations look like this year by the numbers. The catch numbers, the overall catch numbers, were 3 times what we saw last year. So the sum total from all sites. So this is one that's led by Megan Van Koski's lab and at Ag Canada in Saskatoon. So support your Ag Canada personnel, your tax dollars at work, and they do an excellent job of processing these samples to get the weevil counts for them. And yeah, holy Dinah, lots of weevils this year. So keep an eye out for them this year, as well. There's an indication that they're not terribly cold hardy. So this is based in part by work by Hector Carcamo at Ag Canada in Lethbridge, and he and his student determined that their supercooling temperature is about -11, -12. So they're not very cold hardy. You know, you get to -11, -12, they just all spontaneously die, crystal formation. They just can't take temperatures any colder than that. So they really rely on the snow to get through the winter. Of course, we've had some snow in the southeast and north central regions, but the snow is somewhat lacking in southern regions, and we've had some hard cold weather. So here's hoping that knocks them back a bit. Another important pest this year was Bertha armyworm, and this is another one that we survey for. We had a warm spring, of course, and early summer conditions, and that sped their development. They overwinter as pupae, and that sped their development to adulthood. So we had early emergence and big numbers in some regions. So we monitor 290 sites with a network of cooperators, and thanks to everyone who cooperates and contributes to this. We had one site with a cumulative catch over 2,000, so more than 2,000 male moths that doesn't catch female moths. So, you know, assuming the population is 1-to-1 male to female, and we do assume that, so we're looking at a heavy population. We had more than 11 sites with over 1,000. These are some of the color morphs associated with Bertha armyworm larvae. Look for the yellow stripe. That's really conspicuous for these animals. There are other closely related caterpillars like clover cutworm that can damage canola. If you're assessing populations to look at the threshold, just lump them all in together. If you got clover cutworm and Bertha armyworm, you know, munching together side by side, and they're, you know, a half inch long or larger, just consider them all. The damage is inconspicuous. They both respond to the same control products. We did have reports of significant spraying in central and northern regions, and we have some concern that we may be looking at that again. So this is the last Bertha armyworm trap cumulative catches from last year in early August and this year in early August, and you see quite an upregulation in populations and some real hot spots. Populations were relatively localized at high numbers. However, outbreaks are almost never single-year events. So we're going to keep an eye out for this one. We will continue to monitor for it, and if we're seeing big numbers, we'll be sure to get out the word through social media and ministry website and Prairie Pest Monitoring Network channels. Just Bertha armyworm damage. Once again, this is from the crop report. Couple of different weeks here, and some pretty significant damage reported in some different regions. Because of modern commodity prices and modern control costs, I took another look at the established thresholds for these. There's nothing wrong with the thresholds. These are experimentally derived. A lot of work went into this, and but I thought they needed updating for modern commodity prices. So that is $20 canola, and you know, some of the control products, you know, getting up in that $20 plus, $25 plus an acre consideration cost for that. So reassess the thresholds for that, and these are now available. These thresholds are now available on the Prairie Pest Monitoring Network and the ministry website. So have a gander at those. Try to update these for modern considerations. Pulse pests. This is another one that we survey for. This is another invasive. I should have mentioned cabbage seed pod weevil is an invasive. Bertha armyworm is a native. Pulse pest, pea leaf weevil is another invasive. So adults can be problematic. And you see that notch feeding lower right. Pretty rare for them to cause economic damage or kill plants, but it can occur with that characteristic notch feeding. The bigger issue has to do with their egg laying. So she's wandering the wilderness. They do fly, but she's happy to walk, and just dropping individual eggs as she's walking through a field, probably whistling. Dropping individual eggs, those are going to hatch up, tunnel into the soil, and find their way to the rhizobium nodules, where they push their way in and feed on the nodules and clean out the contents. So heavy infestations can result in a nearly 30% yield hit, so they can be significant pests. We again extended our survey further north in response to 2 years ago when we saw a real significant upregulation in populations. So a real bloom of populations in that region, and so we continue to push further north to evaluate their populations. So damaging geographic range increased this year relative to last year as well. So this is what we're seeing for 2025, or what we saw in 2025. So an upregulation in populations. This is another animal that is really sensitive to cold temperatures. It's even more sensitive than cabbage seed pod weevil. So it's supercooling temperature -7, -8. And again, that's based on work done by Hector Carcamo et al. So if they don't have snow cover, there's a very good chance that they could be exposed to damaging temperatures, and the population could be reduced. So you need two things to happen. To my mind, is you need a background of a heavy population and that snow cover. What we saw for 2023 to 2024, I did mention 2023 had heavy populations, but we had poor snow cover, and we saw actually a reduction in populations, and a pretty significant reduction in populations. So look at both of those, and those will inform your decisions to purchase insecticidal seed treatment, so that's cruiser or not to. So it is an expense. It isn't, you're not obliged to use it in most areas, it shouldn't be required in most areas, but it is the most effective way to reduce damage associated with pea leaf weevil in both field pea and faba. Those are its primary reproductive hosts, and those are the crops that are most heavily damaged by pea leaf weevil. So with that, the thresholds, there is a threshold for spraying, but spraying has not been demonstrated to be effective for consistently effective for benefiting yield, and kind of gets into the realm of revenge spraying. Really, seed dressings are the most, or seed treatments are the most effective way to control populations. Pea aphid. We've had multiple reports in the last couple of years of difficulties with group 3 insecticides, primarily those containing lambda cyhalothrin. So those are products like Silencer Matador, which are real go-tos for pea aphid control in a number of crops, or a number of pulse crops, of course. So a number of reports in lentil of, unfortunately, these products not working as well as they could, and in some cases, really not seeing an effect at all. We found out about this at the Crop Diagnostics School in 2024. So thank you to the growers and agronomists who brought this forward. In response to this, we had to move pretty quickly, and we developed a field test kit, based loosely on a field test kit that I helped develop or contributed to in Florida, working with Asian citrusylid. So this is continuation of some similar thinking. So we developed this. So myself, Tyler Wist, Sean Prager at the University of Saskatchewan, and Mike Brown from SPG hatched this plan to develop a rapid field test for assessing resistance. In 2024, we looked at full rate, half rate, quarter rate, and zero. Unfortunately, we couldn't do what's called probit analysis on this. To do that, we needed to expand the range of different rates, and so in 2025, we looked at full, tenth, hundredth, and thousandth, and these are the results of those. So we had, thanks to Sean, who had a tame aphid colony that was naive, so that is no exposure to insecticides and presumed susceptible. We established a colony at the crop protection lab and determined that, there was similarity in our two branches of colonies, which was excellent. And we also looked at second use of the kit. So use it, reuse it in a week, and we were getting the same results. So it seems it is possible to use these kits multiple times, which is great, because there are some materials and work that go into making those. These are some other sites. So in the case of the CPL colony, that's crop protection lab colony, presumed susceptible. The LC50, or the concentration required to kill 50% of the population, was 0.04 of the full rate, so they're sensitive. Is a couple of samples that were collected by cooperators. The spear sample was a difference of an order of magnitude, so you needed 10 times that rate to kill 50% of the population, suggesting tolerance and/or resistance. And you can see here 3 orders of magnitude difference or 2 orders of magnitude difference, so 100-fold difference in samples around the North Battleford area. So pretty clear indication that we do have resistant populations. They do overwinter here in alfalfa and clover, in addition to flying up from the States. This may be the current reality that we have, is group 3 resistance in pea aphids. There are other products registered to control them. And so take a look at the Guide to Crop Protection. There are at least 3 or 4 other products registered to control. One of the go-tos has been carbine, and growers have been reporting good results with that. We did get some reports of forage pests, primarily lygus bug, in clovers, and in some sweet clover trials, these suffer damage from what are likely sweet clover weevil. Spotted wing Drosophila is another survey that occurs, and this one is led by Forrest Sharp, our fruit specialist, and his results have indicated that this animal is really widely distributed now in Saskatchewan. It overwinters well here, and it will continue to be a problem, province-wide, and infecting multiple species of fruit. So, in short, if it ends in berry, it's probably on the menu. They will also attack tomatoes. This is one of the last animals I'll talk about. This is black vine weevil, just another weirdie from 2025. This is one that occurs in other parts of Canada. It's a large, robust, flightless weevil. So the adults are a centimeter to 1.2 centimeters long. So what is that? 3/4 of an inch. So pretty robust animal, 1/2 inch to 3/4 of an inch. I did mention they're flightless, so they're elytra. So that is those hardened shell, which are its forewings, are actually fused together. So yeah, they couldn't fly if they wanted to, but they are tough as nails. I mean, they're difficult animals to dispatch physically, and can be pretty significant pests. As I mentioned before, they do occur in other parts of Canada. We had a report from Saskatchewan in a nursery in the Regina area, and the grower worked to eradicate those populations. There are products registered for their control. Once again, they do occur in other parts of Canada. We don't want them establishing here. They can be really problematic in other parts of Canada for nursery, for turf, for fruit growers. So they have a wide host range, about 100 host species or more than 100 host species, and their feeding on roots can be highly destructive on all of these crops. It is European. It has been in Canada for some time. So 1884 was the first North American occurrence of this. They do respond to insecticidal control, and we're hoping to not have them established in Saskatchewan. Oh, this is my last slide here. I wanted to mention too, this is not strictly speaking a surveillance thing or an insect surveillance thing. It is still a surveillance thing though. So the Pest Management Regulatory Agency conducts a water monitoring program that I'm sure some of you are familiar with. So we've been helping them with that in a consulting capacity, and as a product of this, they have detected pretty significant exceedances. So this is chlorantraniliprole. The first one I'll talk about is in the Moose Jaw River near Milestone. This chlorantraniliprole. So this is the active you'll see in Coragen, Shenzi, Fortenza, Lumiderm, Lumivia, and some other products now as well. So it's getting to be less expensive and more heavily used. And this one actually exceeded the chronic fish level, which is problematic. We had samples detected with as high as 130 micrograms per liter. You can see the ALRV, so that's the aquatic life reference value. So it's an aggregate value. So that's the value that has been determined to be either lethal to aquatic invertebrates at the acute level or damaging to aquatic invertebrates at the chronic level. We also had a detection of chlorpyrifos, and of course, this is an active that's been off the books for a couple of years now, and there's no reason it should have been used at all. And this one was detected as an exceedance in one region as well. So both on the same river. So yeah, please follow label instructions. The chlorantraniliprole exceedance was hot enough and sustained enough that it does actually suggest a large spill that wasn't reported or addressed. So yeah, with that, I will take any questions.
Awesome. Thank you for that great presentation, James. So we'll now have the question period. So the first question is the brown wheat mite different than the wheat curl mite?
Yes. Yeah. No, not even in the same genus. They may not have actually be in the same families. Yeah, so they're only very distantly related. Some of the approaches to them physiologically they're pretty similar, so they respond similarly to specific insecticidal chemistries. Most notably is group 3, so the synthetic pyrethroids. Mites in general, and this includes two-spotted spider mite, tend to, you hit them with a group 3, and they tend to just come roaring back. They tend to really resurge strongly after a group 3 application. Reason being is they're often kept in check by a complex of natural enemies, and of course, if you smoke all those natural enemies with a broad spectrum insecticide, they will come roaring back. So no, different species.
Great, thank you. Second question, can you please comment on flea beetles in camelina and if there's any information available?
Julie Soroka with Ag Canada did some work. Boy, I'm going to say 10 or 15 years ago. So, and she did publish some of this work, and it was suggested that camelina was expressing some tolerance or resistance to at least crucifer flea beetle. That's as much as I know about it, unfortunately. I think if push comes to shove, you will see flea beetles feed on Brassicaceae that have demonstrated tolerance or resistance. And the example I'm thinking of is yellow mustard, which is tolerant and resistant to flea beetle damage because of differences in the chemical composition of those plants. So flea beetles don't like it in that case, and similarly I think with camelina. But if the numbers are high enough and they're starving, yeah, the push comes to shove, they will damage it. I hope that addresses your question.
I think so. Can you
Yep.
speculate on the impact the recent extreme weather in the United States has on migratory insects? Do you suspect an impact on population?
Yeah, I do. Yeah, I mean, we're the insects don't pay much attention to borders, do they? Um, so yeah, I think weather events, particularly when we're dealing with migratory pests or pests that blow in on storms. I mean, we have some deliberately migratory pests like with diamondback moth and of course pea aphid can be blown in on storms. Seems cabbage seed pod weevil. There's a potential for those source populations too have come from the Pacific Northwest of the United States. They do grow canola there. It's not a massive industry, but they are really heavily affected by cabbage seed pod weevil. So yes, in short, yeah, the weather in other parts of North America could certainly have an impact on problems for us in the coming season.
Thank you. Since we had bad breaks of Bertha armyworms in 2025, is it likely they will be bad again in 2026? Will there be higher populations overwintered in the field?
Yeah, I don't want to say absolutely this is what's going to happen, but I did mention before outbreaks are hardly ever single year events in insect populations. So typically you're going to see this ramping up, leveling off, and then fading. So what state we're at right now is uncertain, but it does seem likely that we could be ramping up, and it is one that we're going to continue to monitor for. One of the big regulating factors for Bertha armyworm is a virus. It's called baculovirus, and I'm sure everybody's been walking around a canola field and you see the hanging bag of yuck, and that hanging bag of yuck is it could be a Bertha, it could be clover cutworm, it could be a number of different caterpillars can be affected by this virus, but in canola, good chance it could be a Bertha armyworm larva that has been impacted by this virus. So the virus actually liquefies the inside of the once it's completed its development and it's time for it to disperse. It liquefies the content, the inside of the insect. So that bag is just full of yuck and virus particles. And so any contact with it will cause it to burst, and the virus particles rain down on leaf surfaces where they're taken up by other members of the Bertha population. So that's a real strong regulator. We did see occurrence of this virus and got reports of occurrence of this virus. Was it numerous enough to limit populations in the coming year? I don't know, but we will continue to monitor. I think let's anticipate, hope for the worst, hope for the best, plan for the worst.
For sure. What insecticides are growers using to control the black vine weevil?
Oh, I need the list in front of me. The list is relatively long, as a matter of fact. Yeah, unfortunately, I don't have the list in front of me, and not one I've committed to memory, so I'm going to answer for you.
That's all okay. Last question. Do you have any insight on alfalfa plant bug population estimates for this year and best control options for alfalfa seed production?
I do not have population estimates at this point. We did get a few reports, and I realize that's about as anecdotal as it gets. So yeah, unfortunately, we don't conduct a formal survey on that. Everything. I'd love to. We don't have the resources to survey for them, unfortunately. Products that work well for them. We did get. I'm going to preface this as something that appeared to not work very well, and that is carbine. So we did get a couple of reports of growers concerned that carbine was not working. Carbine is a feeding, it causes feeding cessation, pardon me. So it's the animal quite literally dies of hunger and desiccation. So yeah, the insecticide has almost immediate impact. So it's going to stop the feeding, but the insect's going to still be present. And why I think some growers had the impression that the insecticide didn't work. I mean, people are used to knockdown insecticides. You hit them, you hit them, they twitch, they fall off they fall off the plant. Not the case for that product, but it does work very well.
Great. One more question came in, so last one. If we were in a bad area for cabbage seed pod weevil in 2025, will they be a concern for 2026?
Oh boy, yeah, that's a $64,000 question, isn't it? I think you have a resident population. If you had heavy populations last year, or this past year in 2025, congratulations, you now have a resident population. It all depends on the winter conditions, and so I mentioned before, they're not terribly cold hardy, and so I mean, if you've got not much in the way of snow covering your area, and I know some areas don't, but they do seek out places like shelter belts and grassy berms in the late summer and early fall, and they can be really numerous. I did some emergence trapping for them back when I was a student, and I was getting in the range of 1,000 to 1,500 per square meter. So they really like each other's company. And they're going to hunker down in areas that collect snow. So I think if you're in a region with reported populations from this past year, you should be vigilant this coming year.
Great. Thank you very much, James. Next up, we'll have Dr. Alireza Akhavan, our Provincial Specialist on Plant Disease. He has a master's and PhD in plant pathology. He focuses on biosecurity and disease management to enhance crop health and productivity, developing guidelines to prevent disease spread, and leading initiatives like the Saskatchewan clubroot and verticillium monitoring programs. Previously, he taught at the University of Alberta and worked with Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada, earning multiple awards, including the Agriculture Teaching Hall of Fame Award. Dr. Akhavan is actively involved in research and extension activities, providing valuable insights and support to farmers and agronomists across Saskatchewan. We'll start whenever you're ready, Alireza.
Thank you very much, Rebecca, for the introduction. Good morning, everyone. My name is Alireza Akhavan. As Rebecca mentioned, I am the Provincial Plant Disease Specialist with the Saskatchewan Ministry of Agriculture, and today I am going to share some of the findings from the 2025 Saskatchewan Pulse and Canola Disease Surveys with you, as well as high-level insights from the Fusarium Head Blight Survey for wheat and barley in province. So the work I am presenting today is a teamwork for sure, involving multiple organizations and many people. I would like to acknowledge the invaluable contributions of the provincial specialists, crops extension specialists, and the crop protection laboratory from the Saskatchewan Ministry of Agriculture, the SARM Plant Health Technical Advisors from the Saskatchewan Association of Rural Municipalities, Sask Oilseeds for the partnership in running the canola disease monitoring programs, SCIC Discovery Seed Laboratory, and the surveyors from the Meadow Lake Co-op, Bayer Crop Science, Nutrient, as well as the volunteer agrologists, and most importantly, the producers, because they are the ones that grant permission for us so we can have access to their land and do all these surveys. So the terminology that I will use very often during this talk would be prevalence, incidence, and severity. And I just wanted to refresh your mind that prevalence is the percent of fields surveyed that have the disease, while incidence is the percent of plants surveyed within each field that have symptoms of the disease. And severity is the proportion of plant tissue that shows symptoms. So prevalence and incidence are straightforward because they are presented as percentage. But for severity, for each disease, we use a disease severity scale, which is well adopted by that specific research community. So it may be 0 to 3 or 0 to 5 or 1 to 7. And I mentioned that when I talk about severity for the diseases that I am talking about. So starting with canola diseases in Saskatchewan in 2025, we looked at 201 canola fields for the general canola disease survey. And during the survey, incidence and prevalence was recorded for diseases and severity was rated for some of those diseases. In each field, we'll look at 100 plants and we assess them. And again, we calculate prevalence, incidence, and severity out of this activity. So usually, traditionally, we start with Sclerotinia stem rot information. I will talk just a little bit of what we saw for this disease during the survey. In 2025, Sclerotinia stem rot was present in 40% of crops surveyed in Saskatchewan that they had at least trace levels of the disease. This number was 56% last year. Incidence was on average across all surveyed fields at 4%, and this number was 9% last year. And incidence in infected fields was 9%. This number was 16% last year. Severity in a disease severity scale of 0 to 5 was 0.09. And again, this number was also last year at 0.24. Severity in infected fields was 0.21 out of 5, and this number was 0.43 last year. So roughly, I can say we saw less than half of the disease we had in 2024 in 2025. So we had less Sclerotinia stem rot in 2025, and it was mainly because of the dry June we had, which is very crucial for this disease to thrive and for the sclerotia of this pathogen to germinate. But dry June can impact this disease. So here we have the regional breakdown of Sclerotinia prevalence and incidence results from this year's survey in the province. Prevalence was highest in the southeast region at around 50%. And lowest in the southwest region at around 10%. And incidence was highest in the northeast and west central regions, given some of the irrigated fields are located there at 5%, and lowest in the southwest region. So perhaps the take-home message from this regional breakdown is that usually the pattern for Sclerotinia stem rot is well aligned with the moisture and environment in the area. And southwest, because it is drier, usually has the least Sclerotinia stem rot. And that was the case this past growing season, 2025 as well. So this is also well mirrored in the heat map here. So we'll see areas with like more moisture had higher level of incidence of Sclerotinia stem rot, and they were mainly located in northeast or west central, given those irrigated fields are impacted by Sclerotinia in 2025. This graph is a historical graph, compares average incidence of Sclerotinia stem rots in 2025 to the previous years, dating back to 1999, based on data from the General Canada Disease Survey of Saskatchewan. This graph also is really interesting. I really like that because it shows how dependent Sclerotinia is on environment factors, particularly moisture. And those years, excuse me, with more moisture, excuse me, we had more diseases. Sclerotinia incidence, as you see, peaked in 2016 in all the three prairie provinces of Alberta, Saskatchewan, and Manitoba. That year was a very wet year across the prairies. We got at almost 24% incidence in Saskatchewan. Then 2017 was a dry year, so it dropped significantly. And in other years are also, it's quite well aligned with the moisture we had overall. And as I mentioned, last growing season, 2025, we had a dry June. So our incidence of Sclerotinia stem rot kind of lowered significantly compared to the year before 2024. So it dropped from 9% to 4% incidence. Blackleg. Blackleg is another disease that is assessed carefully during the survey because of its importance not only on yield but also on some trade issues. So this disease is relatively has been less affected by environment and moisture relative to Sclerotinia stem rot. Still, it likes moisture and warm temperature in early spring, and it thrives more under those circumstances, but it is still like being frequently found even in a very, very dry year. So it is uh, not as reliant on moisture as a disease like Sclerotinia stem rot. So last year, we had lower numbers compared to 2024. Remember that in 2024, we had all-time highs for all of these values. Like we had 92% of fields with blackleg in 2024. Our incidence was all-time high at 23% in 2024. And also our severity was very high at 0.39. So all of those numbers in 2024 was like our all-time high. But this year, we again had like a drier June, so we saw the same trend as we just saw for Sclerotinia stem rot for blackleg as well. So in 2025, we had 83% of the crops surveyed in 2025 had at least trace levels of blackleg. I understand that these numbers are still very high. Again, as I said, even in a dry year, you can find blackleg quite often. Incidence was 11% across all surveyed fields and 14% in infected fields. Severity on a disease severity a scale of 0 to 5 was 0.14 across all surveyed fields and 1% in infected fields. Again, these are the numbers that we are used to see that, and they are much lower than numbers we observed in 2024. Again, roughly, perhaps we had less than half of the disease we had in 2024 in 2025. Regional breakdown for blackleg prevalence and incidence from this year. So Northwest and Southeast had higher prevalence at around 95%. Northeast had the lowest prevalence at around 67%. Again, many fields, but just relatively lower. And the average blackleg basal canker incidence was highest in the Northwest region at 21%, quite double the province average, and lowest in the Southwest region. So perhaps take-home message from this regional breakdown can be that Northwest had the highest amount of blackleg, almost twice the average of the province. So again, this graphic comparison of blackleg incidence was seen this year compared to previous years, going back to 2011, according to General Canada Disease Survey data in Saskatchewan. Overall, overall, there had been an increase in blackleg being seen between 2011 and now. But again, as you see, we were quite happy to see that sharp drop happen this year, because last year we got 23% incidence overall average across province, and it was very concerning. But the analysis we did in 2024 showed that it had nothing to do with resistance or agronomy practice. It was all about environment and showers we had in certain areas in 2024, and we had a drier June. So it was, I can say, purely environmental. And now we got kind of to the numbers we are more used to see. So at 11%, which is the same number we had in 2022 and 2023, because 2022 we had 11%, 2023 we had 12%. So close to those numbers, and definitely much lower than last year. Another disease with a sharp drop was aster yellows, became concerning for 2 years in 2024 and 2023. Lots of fields in Saskatchewan had aster yellows, and some of those got to the significant area in terms of their impact on yield. So we didn't have like very many infectious aster leafhopper last growing season 2025, and then later on we saw the impact on the visual symptoms. So our numbers significantly dropped from the previous year in 2024. Our prevalence was 6%. This is an official number because this comes from if you see the disease in 100 plants you assess randomly in a field. But and this number was 25% the year before. But aster yellows is very visible disease. So even if you are on the road and you look at the crop, you see plants that they show symptoms of aster yellows, and they are usually taller and very clear that they have aster yellows. If you also include those numbers on top of the number you get based on your assessment of 100 plants that you randomly assessed in a field, and add to those numbers, then 20% of fields in Saskatchewan last year had at least trace level of aster yellows. And remember that this number in 2024 was 71%. So our numbers are much lower for 2025 compared to 2024 and 2023. And the same for incidence, like our incidence, our average incidence, this number can be related to yield loss, was just 0.1% in 2025, while it was 0.6% in 2024. And it can kind of directly translate it to the yield loss we get. I guess if we multiply this number by 0.75, it would be the yield loss we get. So was not as significant as it was in 2024 and 2023, which was quite a good thing to see. So powdery mildew, it came to conversations a lot, and however, during the formal survey, we saw it only in 3 of the surveyed fields out of 201. So it is perhaps 1.5%, so not a big deal. But remember that we do the survey at growth stage of 5.2 and 5.3. But later on, during late growing season, severe powdery mildew was observed by agrologists and reported to us around like September time, early September. In certain fields, canola stems were coated with a white powdery layer that could be wiped off with your fingers. Also, we got anecdotal reports from dozens of fields across Saskatchewan and Alberta, and it was noted that during harvest, released spores like forms of white, sticky cloud and film on equipment, reducing visibility when they accumulate on windows, creating additional safety hazards on machinery. So together with a couple of colleagues led by Dr. Kelly Turkington in Lacombe, we put together And of course, Mike Harding, my counterpart in Alberta, and Kip Gabbard from Alberta Canola, we put together an article and kind of posted it on Prairie Crop Disease Monitoring Network. And you can see and try to address some of those issues if you want to take a look. So Alternaria black spot, we saw it on 57% of the fields this year. This is another disease we take a look. It was lower than 2024, which was seen in 69%. Clawroot monitoring program. The Saskatchewan Clawroot monitoring program is a collaboration among the ministry with SARM Plant Health Technical Advisors, Saskatchewan Crop Insurance Corporation, and Sask Oilseeds. It is 100% permission-based, and remember that clawroot is not a declared or regulated pest any longer in Saskatchewan since June 2024. So it's not a regulated pest, it's just the normal, of course, diseases are not normal. So I correct myself and say regular canola disease. So it's not like a specific regulated or declared pest any longer. It's a regular disease. From the regulatory perspective, there's no difference between clawroot and other diseases like blackleg and sclerotinia. They are all diseases of canola now. In 2025, again, permission-based, we looked at 235 fields across 152 RMs. 201 of them were assessed during the General Canola Disease Survey. 34 fields also tested through the Sask Oilseed Voluntary On-Farm Soil Testing Program. The good thing for Saskatchewan was that we did not find any new visible symptoms of the clawroot disease in any of the assessed field. Also, none of the soil samples out of 235 got back or returned positive results. So our numbers remain the same. This is very good. At the same time, if you looked at the report from Alberta on clawroot, you see that they still continue to find a significant amount of clawroot in Alberta. So our map for clawroot distribution in Saskatchewan have not changed compared to 2024. And again, this is a cumulative maps. So it's cumulative testing from 2008 to 2025. And again, as I mentioned, this year we did not find any visible symptoms for the third year in a row. And for the very first time, we also didn't have any soil samples return positive results within the program. So these are good, but this also the finding in Alberta also suggests that disease is still of a very high risk, and any person or organization with a stake in clawroot management should continue their due diligence in managing this disease. So verticillium stripe in canola, very concerning. It's just spreading across the prairies year after year, and there's still not much management in place in toolbox of producers as of now, except for rotation perhaps. But there are lots of good things and good studies are being done in academia and industry and research institutes as well. But again, there is no significant management tool in producers' toolbox. But we got at least a couple cultivars came to the market as tolerant, which is great. But we hope for more, hopefully soon. Again, we wait a little bit before releasing the results from verticillium stripe until we get the confirmation from the lab, which is the Discovery Seed Lab, because of the symptoms. Sometimes are very tricky to differentiate from other diseases like blackleg. But we received the results, and 33% of the fields assessed during the General Canola Disease Survey had verticillium stripe as well. I understand these numbers are big, but this is quite close to what we saw last year. Sask Oilseed has its own free disease testing program. They also found the disease in additional 20 RMs that we added to this map, and we got to a total of 73 RMs confirmed with verticillium stripe in 2025. And if you look at this year map and compare it to the last 2 years that we also had the program, we see still there are more more cases on the east side of the province, but there are cases in other regions as well, as west as the RM of Maple Creek in 2023. And of course, the disease now is confirmed in Alberta as well. So at 6% uh, incidence, at 6% prevalence last year. Uh, so it is now more of a prairie issue than it used to be. And many of us at least some point before 2021, we looked at it as more of a problem in Manitoba, but now it's a prairie-wide issue. That was my last slide for canola. Move on to pulse crop diseases in Saskatchewan in 2025. We have almost a comprehensive program on pulse crops as well. I will be sharing some key findings from the 2025 Saskatchewan Pulse Disease Survey, and these are provincial surveys that I am touching base on given the time, but there were other surveys on pulse crops as well. So province looked at 61 lentil crops, 47 field pea crops, and 8 dry bean under irrigation for foliar and root rot diseases. And I start with lentil. For lentil again, we looked at a total of 61 lentil fields between July 8 and August 13. In each field, we looked at 10 plants at 5 serving sites across a W-shaped pattern. So for 50 plants in total per field, and individual sites were located at least 50 meters from the field edge, at least 30 meters apart. We actively survey for anthracnose, Ascochyta blight, Sclerotinia stem and pod rot, botrytis stem and pod rot, stem phyllium blight, and root rot complex. But our surveyors are trained, so if they see a suspect issue that does not fit any of these diseases, they also report it separately. So anthracnose has been the most prevalent foliar disease in Saskatchewan for a while, and including 2025. Was identified in 69% of the surveyed lentil crops with an overall average incidence of 37% and average severity of 0.7 out of 5. So again, sometimes like in Sclerotinia black, you saw this, you saw that all the 3 values of prevalence, incidence, severity lowered, but sometimes it is not as straightforward as those cases. Like in this case, you see we had the disease in significantly lower number of fields. Like in 2024, we had this disease in 85% of lentil crops. But on the other hand, average incidence and severity remained almost the same, very close to last year with just slight changes, just perhaps 1% lower incidence and 0.1 out of 5 higher severity, so almost same incidence and severity, but significantly lower amount of the fields. So we should be very careful how to interpret these values. It actually means that you had the disease in less number of fields, but those fields that had disease had higher amount of the disease. So that's the interpretation. It is quite a number of years that the second most important foliar disease on lentil is stem phyllium blight. And this year we had it in 31%, so almost a third of the fields had stem phyllium blight. Average incidence was 5%. So both numbers are slightly higher than last year that we had it in 25% of fields and with average incidence of 4%. Not as clear scenario happens for Ascochyta blight. Ascochyta blight suggesting symptoms was observed in 8 fields in southwest, east central, and 2 fields in west central region, accounting for 13% of crops, and with average incidence of 0.6%. The number last year was 9% of crops and average incidence of 0.9, so very comparable. This is again a specific case because it's important to note that diagnosis was only based on visual symptoms in the field, not in the lab. And on the other hand, in many cases, you don't see pycnidia, which is the main characteristic of this disease at that time in the field. But on the other hand, some of these numbers are very well aligned with some of the results from the seed testing labs that they test for the seeds. So we should also be very cautious. So I believe in these numbers. Sclerotinia stem and pod rot is not a big player in lentil as a disease, but was present in 3% of fields, and average incidence was 1%. Last year, 4% of fields, average incidence was 0.1. Again, not a very big player in Saskatchewan as a disease on average. Root rot complex, perhaps the most important issue overall. We said anthracnose is the most important foliar disease, but overall root rot complex to me is the most important issue we are dealing with in lentil crops. So we saw it in 84% of the surveyed crops this year, just 1% less than last year. But average incidence was 50% more than last year, and the severity was almost higher. So overall, given that the prevalence or number of fields stayed the same, but average incidence was 50% higher and severity was higher, I can say roughly we had 50% more root rot overall this year looking at the incidence for lentil. Usually we by this time we should have posted all of these reports on the Western Forum on Western Forum on crop pest or Western Forum Western Forum website. But this year, due to some technical issues, these interim reports have not been posted on Western Forum on Pest Management website as of now, so we included them as attachment to this this talk, so you have access to them. So if you have special interest to see these values on a specific region, southwest, southeast, etc., what happened for root rot complex, how many field assessed, what were the numbers for each disease, if it was like consistent with the average of the province or it was regionally different, then you can go to these reports that we attach to this invite and look at those numbers for prevalence for lentil and for incidence for lentil and also for field pea and dry bean and for canola diseases as well. But again, there were some technical issues this year that these numbers, these reports have not been posted now on Western Forum on Pest Management, but usually the interim reports every year by this time are posted on Western Forum on Pest Management, and I can show it to you which website is that. If you click on Western Forum on Pest Management, you get to Western Forum on Pest Management website, and then on your right-hand side, there's a menu. There's an insect portion that all of the provincial insect reports are can be found there. But that's for Western Committee on Crop Pests. But under that, you will see the menu for Western Committee on Plant Diseases. And if you go to number 4, Annual Disease Situation Reports, and click on that, you will see that the reports are posted there. Again, you will see the last set of reports are 2024. Again, by this time, it should have been posted the 2025, but there were some technical issues that it is not there. But we attach the Saskatchewan reports to this this invite and this call, so you can find those reports there. Again, only for the current year, go to there. You will see reports from the past year, but don't look at them because remember, they are interim reports. They are not final reports. If you, I close this. If you want to see the final reports, just go to Canadian Plant Disease Survey. So if you want to look at the current year report or past growing season report, which was 2025, for us at this time, go to Western Forum on Pest Management. But if you want to see the previous year's reports, like 2024 and before that, just go to Canadian Plant Disease Survey. I click on that just to show it to you. Yeah, this is Canadian Plant Disease Survey, and if you look at that, you will see reports of 2024. In 2025 issue, we have report of 2024. In 2024, we have reports of 2023, and so on and so forth. And if you come back, you will see you can find report as old as 1920. So for final reports, just go to Canadian Plant Disease Survey archive. But for the current year interim report, go to Western Forum on Pest Management. So moving back to the rest of the talk, looking at field pea diseases, we looked at 47 field pea crops this year. We looked at them between July 2nd and August 8th. We looked at 50 plants in total in field, 10 plants in each of the 5 surveying sites along a horizontal W-shaped pattern. The rest of the methodology was quite the same as lentil. So I just jumped to the disease portion. In field pea, we actively survey for root rot complex, Mycosphaerella ascochyta blight complex, downy mildew, white mold, bacterial blight, and the severity of the root rot complex and Mycosphaerella ascochyta blight complex is also being assessed for each plant. So prevalence and incidence for all of these diseases. And for root rot and Mycosphaerella, we also look at the severity as well. Mycosphaerella ascochyta blight complex has been the most important foliar diseases of field pea. Again, this year, we saw this disease in 72% of the surveyed field pea crops. Average incidence was 43%, and the disease severity was 1.6 on a scale of 1 to 7. These numbers are lower than last year. Last year, the disease was present in 95% of pea crops. Incidence was 61%, and severity was almost the same. But we had not almost the same. What was 1.8 is still slightly higher. So all the 3 values of prevalence and incidence and severity were lower this year for a field pea Mycosphaerella ascochyta complex compared to 2024. And that's also perhaps due to drier condition in early growing season. So bacterial blight, symptoms consistent with bacterial blight were present in 64% of crops. Average incidence was 14%. Again, this is a different disease. The more damage you have, the more physical damage, either insect or a storm or hail, then you get more bacterial blight because they allow entry point to the plant. And we had more of this disease compared to last year, which was present in 35% of fields, and average was 7%. And for this disease, we do bacterial streaming tests on a subset of the samples, but not on every sample. Downy mildew was frequently found in field pea crops, was present in 40% of fields, with an average incidence of 16%. There were regions that they had downy mildew in almost every field, but on average, the numbers are lower than 2024 for province. That was present in 60% of fields with average incidence of 23%. It's a disease loves moisture, and it is a disease when it's established, it is very hard to manage because the pathogen is not fungus, so there are only a couple of fungicides that they can suppress the disease to some extent. But anyhow, we had lower compared relative to 2024. Root rot complex, again, to me, is the number one issue. Again, we named the Ascochytomycosporidium blight complex as the most important or most frequently found foliar disease. But overall, I think root rot complex is the most important issue in field pea crops. Was found in 87% of fields, quite a high number. Average incidence was 50%. Severity was 2.09 on a 1 to 7 disease severity scale. And anyhow, these numbers, I understand these are big numbers, but still they are lower relative to 2024, for which the disease was present in 90% of fields. Average incidence was 57% and severity was 2.2 out of 7. So the numbers were a little bit lower, but still you see that the issue persists there. So again, if you, the same as what I said for lentil, if you want to see specifically on the values for each of these diseases for prevalence or incidence in certain crop region, then look at those reports and like find if like your region was quite average for close to average of the province, or a disease was found particularly in certain region more significantly than other regions. So the reports will help you to extract those type of information. And this is for incidents. So this year we didn't have a soybean survey, but we had for the second year we had a dry-bean survey. And this includes fields only under irrigation. It's kind of a support to irrigation as well. So we looked at, it's a small scale survey. We looked at 8 irrigated dry-bean fields in irrigated areas of the province between August 13th and 18th. And same methodology as for lentil and for field pea, so I'm not going to repeat that. Exact the same methodology. We actively look to find bacterial blood, and when I say we actively to look for, it means we listed these diseases on the protocol, but we never in a field actively try to find diseased plant. We actually go blind and try to choose plants randomly, like we go to 5 serving site. Don't look at the plants, don't let our eyes grab the diseased plant, and try to randomly pick 10 plants from each of the 5 sites. But diseases that we have particular attention to, I can reward that, is bacterial blight complex for dry bean, Sclerotinia stem rot, anthracnose, and root rot complex. So this year, similar to last year, we found bacterial blight complex in every field we assessed. The average incidence for bacterial blight complex was lower this year compared to last year, was at 51%. Last year was 66%. And severity was also slightly lower at 0.6 out of 5 compared to 0.7 last year. Again, very important issue in dry bean acres. It is in every field, and quite the incidence is high. It is very, very difficult for a surveyor to differentiate which bacterial blight is in the field visually. So surveyors send samples to the lab, and then lab confirms at the field level if the issue came from excuse me, bacterial brown spot or common bacterial blight or halo blight. All of these 3 are part of the bacterial blight complex, but at the field level, we just rate for bacterial blight as a complex. We also look at for anthracnose. Last year, like half of the 10 fields, like 5 fields out of 10 had anthracnose. This year, 2025, we didn't find any with anthracnose. In 2024, we found 5 of the 10 we looked at had anthracnose. And reverse happened for Sclerotinia stem rot. In 2024, we didn't find any, but in 2025, we found it in every field. and with quite significant average incidence across fields at 27%. And some plants like were badly colonized, I can say. Root rot complex was higher this year compared to last year, so we saw it in 88% of the fields, 30% incidence, and 1.4 out of 7 severity scale. Last year was 30% prevalence and 7% incidence and just 1.1 severity, but this year was higher. When bacterial blight complex samples were analyzed at the crop protection laboratory found that all the 8 fields assessed had common bacterial blight. 7 of those had bacterial brown spot on top of common bacterial blight, and 2 fields also had halo blight. And this is a picture I took when we did the survey for drive-in. Just look at those scrotia of the Scrotinia stem rot on a pot. And perhaps one of the reasons is our rotation with canola and perhaps accumulation of the inoculum. So very quickly, I will touch base on Saskatchewan Fusarium head blight updates. So we do a survey for cereal diseases in Saskatchewan. It is done by Saskatchewan Crop Insurance Corporation. The leaf portions will be assessed at the Agriculture Agri-Food Canada and University of Saskatchewan, but the heads for wheat and barley are being assessed at the Crop Protection Laboratory in Regina. This year for wheat, the total crop surveyed for wheat was 123, 72 common wheat, and 51 durum wheat. And it is the methodology is like crop adjusters with the Saskatchewan Crop Insurance Corporation randomly collect 50 spikes from crops at late milk to early dose stages. And then the crop protection lab does the analysis for a subsample of 30 of those spikes for visual FHP symptoms. And then they do the plating and the speciation of the Fusarium species involved in the Fusarium head blight on that certain year. So FHP occurred in 26% of the common wheat this year and 71% of the durum wheat in 2025. FHP was more prevalent in 2025 in durum than in 2024 when it occurred in just 18% of the durum wheat crops, and perhaps part of that is the moisture that came quite timely for this disease to thrive. So the provincial mean severity was 0.03% for common wheat and 0.53% for durum. And in crops with FHP symptoms, Fusarium poae was the most prevalent species at 78% in common wheat and 83% in durum wheat. And this is consistent with the previous findings from 2024 and 2023. Fusarium graminearum, the most aggressive FHP pathogen, was not isolated from common wheat this year. In 2025, and was prevalent in 3% of durum wheat fields with FHP symptoms. Moving to barley, in terms of the Fusarium head blight assessment in 2025, I apologize for the 2024 number in bracket. I should have updated in 2025. So in 2025, Fusarium head blight incidence and severity were assessed in 44 barley crops, 38 two-row, and 6 six-row. FHP occurred in 66% of the surveyed barley crops overall, and at a mean provincial severity or FHP index of 0.43%. And this severity index is slightly lower than in 2024. So similar to wheat, the most prevalent Fusarium species here was also Fusarium poae, which was detected in 60% of barley crops with FHB symptoms. And Fusarium graminearum was also found in just 3% of barley crops with FHB symptoms. So the Fusarium head blight mapping tool, or the risk viewer, we call it sometimes, at the website Fusarium head. If you just Google Fusarium head blight risk mapping tool, it pops up in prairiefhb.ca. The tool will be available this upcoming growing season again to help you in understanding the risk in your area based on the date, crop type, variety, and the type of risk. And you can also adjust it, and there's a help there that you can review before using the tool. The tool will be available within the growing season. And I guess that was my last slide. Due to the time, I try to just let you explore the regional differences for especially pulse crops using those reports that we posted. And this picture shows me with Grace, the production technology intern, who's been heavily involved in coordination of these surveys. And in that day, we did the survey of one irrigated dry bean field. So with that one, perhaps, yeah, that's my calendar. And okay, so perhaps I just stop sharing. And see if there's any question.
Great, thank you very much, Alireza. We have a couple questions for you. Are you finding more bacterial blight in cereals? What symptoms should we be watching out for?
So it depends on, first of all, perhaps I need to say that we do not have like an active surveillance program for bacterial blight in cereals, but we get the direct reports from agrologists, or we get actual samples submitted to the crop protection lab. So it depends on the type of crop and depends on the type of bacterial blight. The symptoms may be different. So bacterial leaf streak is one of the main bacterial blights in cereals, but there are other bacterial blight types in cereals as well, including on wheat and barley and the oats. Specific to bacterial leaf streak, as the name suggests, you need to look at the symptoms, that they are like a strict pattern within the leaf. And usually if you look at those leaves through the sun, the lesions are more translucent than any fungal caused spots that usually they are darker at the center. For bacteria, they are usually lighter at the center, and also they are yellowish, but sometimes they look brownish. If you send them to a lab, it is a quick test, because if we just take a piece of that tissue and put it on 1 drop of water and look at it under the microscope, we see bacterial ooze streaming out of the tissue. So that's for bacterial blight in general, but specific to bacterial leaf streaking, I guess that streak type pattern of the disease is the most important pattern. But there are viral infections that they might kind of resemble those symptoms. So I guess if you see anything suspect, and those viral infections are important too. So if you see anything suspect, like streaked or straight lines on the leaf on wheat or barley or oat, you can take a good picture and send it our way, and then we can work together to actually identify the exact cause of the disease. Is it bacterial, or is it a virus similar to bacteria? And if it is bacteria, which one? And if it is virus, which one? And there are labs that they are happy to support us to kind of narrow down those identification.
Great. Is Fusarium head blight becoming more an issue under irrigation compared to dryland?
So usually this is a disease that that likes moisture. So definitely, if we have under irrigated scenario, we should kind of have a closer look at this disease compared to dry land. Perhaps that that risk assessment tool or viewer for FHB is very helpful for dry land. But for irrigated acres, I guess it would be very field level, and each producer on irrigated context, they need to look at the circumstances separately for their own field, because anyhow that FHB risk assessment tool does not actually cover these cases for irrigated acres. But overall, yes, yeah.
Thank you. Are there any commercial canola hybrids that are resistant to verticillium?
So we should look at it from two angles. One is the characterized resistance, and one is if a germplasm showed more tolerance through the general disease screening. So these are very different. So if I have like 10 germplasm and I just screen them against a source of verticillium, and one performs better than others, it would be through general disease screening. But if I know which gene is exactly there, it is through the characterized kind of through the gene characterization. So at this time, we don't have any cultivar in the market which has characterized gene in them. So we have at this time no cultivar in the market that they have resistance based on gene characterization. But there are at least two companies that they introduced cultivars with higher tolerance to verticillium stripe through the general disease screening, so they showed more tolerance. And if you want kind of to know more information, we had like an update on Canola Watch that you can find the name of those cultivars, and also suggestion. If you look at that Canola Watch article, you see that there's a suggestion that you grow if it is possible, and if the seed is available, and if you have a certain area of your field impacted by verticillium, perhaps you grow a little bit of those seeds in those areas, see if they stand against verticillium before growing the whole acre with that seed. That would be great if possible. I understand it may or may not be possible, but at least two lead companies introduced two cultivars with claiming with higher verticillium stripe tolerance. But again, my understanding is it came through the general disease screening and not through the characterized gene streamline. But there are lots of work going on both in academia and in industry to try to introduce QTLs on the backbone of elite cultivars and kind of have those characterized gene resistance in those cultivars. But at this time, this is the situation we are at.
Thank you. Why have we seen so much powdery mildew the last few years in canola? I have seen combines and swathers coated in white dust during harvest.
So again, it is very complicated. This was a disease that it was not around for a decade, I guess, for a decade at like in 2022 in Manitoba, it showed up, and again, it kind of we found it more frequently the year before 2025. So 2024, we even within the window of the general canola disease survey, which is just the growth state 5.2, when it is still seeds are in the lower pods green, we found it in 13 fields, but all those 13 fields was close to one another. But then again, last growing season, we found it only in 3 fields. But then in the shoulder season, late in season, we found it in many fields in Saskatchewan and Alberta, in central and southern Alberta, north and south of Saskatchewan. And all of this area in that time had like significantly colder nights and warmer day, it seems that it helps the pathogen thrives. This pathogen is not reliant on moisture a lot. It just needs a little moisture to germinate, the spores to germinate. But after that, it is very, very hard in terms of tolerating the fluctuation of moisture. So that then I guess the inoculum was present, and also those cold nights and warm days impacted the disease to go through cycles more rapidly and get to more fields. So again, that's a very, very uh, important question, because some fields actually had serious consequences of the powdery mildew being present in those fields in terms of their impact on desiccation. Usually that's an obligate parasite, so it also may keep the cannula stay green, and it impacts also because it's hydrophobic, it impacts the desiccation. And again, those dust are some people are showing actually expressing severe allergy to those dust or to powdery mildew spores in general, and also some other hazards that we've heard of are linked to powdery mildew. But again, this is not a disease that we can predict what we will see next year, because the environment and temperatures are impacting the amount of powdery mildew like very, very significantly.
Great. Thank you very much, Alireza. That was our last question. So next up, we will have Cory Jacob, our Provincial Specialist on Weed Control. He served in an acting capacity for 2 years before becoming permanent in the role 6 months ago. Cory works to provide information and recommendations on weed control and the Weed Control Act to producers, agronomists, government departments, and agencies, as well as municipalities. He grew up on a grain farm in southeast Saskatchewan near Momart. He received both his Bachelor and Master's of Science in Agriculture from the University of Saskatchewan. And we'll start whenever you're ready, Cory.
Perfect. I just want to confirm, Rebecca, with my screen, or am I on the wrong screen?
Nope, it looks good.
Perfect. Okay, excellent. Thank you very much this morning for the introduction there, Rebecca, and the participants on this rather cold January day. So my talk is going to be a little bit different than Alireza's and James's. I don't quite have as robust of pest surveying that they do and they focus on, but I do have some that we do here. So I'm going to talk about the invasive pigweeds that I've talked about a little bit in the past, and a little bit as well at the end of the talk. I'm going to touch on the risk for herbicide carryover going into next growing season, because of course we've had several dry years in a row, especially in some parts of the province, and this will, I think it's a very timely topic to present on. So the first thing is I do want to give a bit of a thank you to Kristen Obide. She is the weed control specialist with the provincial government in Ontario. She provided a lot of this information and background for these invasive pigweeds, as we really don't have them here, so we're not as as comfortable with talking about them as we're still learning about them, especially in the province here. So of course that's her contact information where she can be reached at as well on X or Twitter. So to start with the emerging pigweeds, so really what are they? So there's two of them. There's water hemp and there's Palmer amaranth. Amaranthus tuberculatus and Amaranthus pamleri. So they are dioecious members of the pigweed family. Dioecious meaning separate male and female plants. Water hemp here on the top right-hand part of the screen, it has longer and narrower leaves than our typical pigweed species. And then on the bottom part of the screen here, we have Palmer amaranth, which has petioles typically a little bit, I want to say, well, here, I'll start with this here. So the petioles are longer and more of an egg-shaped leaf blade, as we can see here. They're a little bit shorter and fatter leaves than the longer and slender leaves that we have on water hemp. The big distinguishing characteristic is they're both hairless plants or weeds. So their stems are hairless, they're smooth. So that's a big distinguishing characteristic when we talk about a quick identification from another weed in the pigweed family. And the big one, or the reason why we're talking about this, is of course they're very aggressive growers and competitors with crops. So a little bit about the seriousness of the situation. So number one, We've been on our doorstep for several years in the province. So this is a map of Saskatchewan here with our different cropping districts, I believe, set out. To the right here is Manitoba, basically a distribution of their RMs. We've had water hemp in Manitoba confirmed since 2022, so this is year number 4 now. In the red, we can see the RMs where it's confirmed, so a lot more in that southern and eastern part of Manitoba. They think it might have come in spring from this, from I believe it would have been North Dakota when the Red River Valley floods. And we did have a couple confirmed cases outside of that, so one more in northwest Manitoba and one on the Saskatchewan-Manitoba border pretty much, where we had a seed grower who was swathing canola and saw something off looking, and he got off the swather and looked at it. So we were lucky there that he got off the swather and identified, or at least looked at what was going on there, and the weeds there have been eradicated. But I mean, that had a very strong possibility to make it into the province, being very close to the border, kind of straight east of Yorkton in that country. Typically, when we do survey for the invasive pigweeds in the province, I'm focusing pretty heavily on southeast Saskatchewan. RMs maybe 1, 2, 3, 4, and north a little bit from there, Estevan, Latman area, and east Redvers, Carnduff, kind of in that pocket because of how close the invasive pigweeds are to that part of the province. As well, I do go up into some of those RMs, 152, 181, whatever area you want to call it, Spy Hill, Churchbridge, Langenberg, just to see if there are some escapes or some other populations that we missed. We can see here in the graph as well, in the diagram, that North Dakota has it in quite a number of counties, and some of them do border the southeast part of Saskatchewan, so that's why we're surveying very close to that area in the province. As well, Montana has the weeds very close as well to our border. In 2025, I think August of 2025, water hemp had been detected in Hill County, Montana, which I have here kind of highlighted in orange. That kind of borders the very southwest part of Saskatchewan. I think that's Console or maybe Frontier area. Of course, they reported it as eradicated, but still to be aware of, because that does border the province pretty well. In a part of the province that we really didn't actively survey in this year, as it came as a later hit. But we do try to actively survey, especially we started surveying kind of in south central Saskatchewan. RMs 9, 10, 11, 12, 39, 40, kind of Mitten, Ceylon, Coronach areas. It's not very far away there, and I think it's Roosevelt County. Now, Palmer amaranth as well. It's found in a lot of. It's very well distributed in North Dakota. I'll put it that way. So. This graph is a few years old, but of course it does show the different counties in North Dakota where it's been found. The blue counties are where it's been found and no longer detected. Green is where it's previously found and under management. And of course, a couple new populations showing up as of 2022. I haven't gotten an updated map, but I can at least give you an idea of their distribution. The big one is in October 2025. We'd also got a report that it was found and confirmed. This is Palmer amaranth, the worst of the two in my opinion. Found in Divide County in northwestern North Dakota, which really borders up kind of in that area south of Estevan. That's why I put Estevan on the map. So it borders up to kind of that Estevan area, Torquay. Of course, that population that they'd found, or the couple individual plants, have of course been eradicated, but there'll have to be some future just some surveying or investigating at that site to make sure that there weren't any escapes or some other species there. But it's very close to home, or to crossing the border when we're getting the counties that are bordering up against the province here. So just a good awareness piece, because they're weeds we don't want here to get introduced. So part of the other reasoning is, why don't we want them here? So they're, number one, they're dioecious. Water hemp and Palmer amaranth are dioecious. So it means they must outcross to produce seed. That results in a very high amount of genetic diversity and the ability to transfer herbicide resistance traits through pollen. So of course, they've really ramped up and very quickly developed herbicide resistance to a lot of herbicides and active ingredients that they use in the United States and in Canada as well. So that's one of the big concerns. So putting that into real context, so the latest that I could get for herbicide resistance from water hemp is Manitoba has populations resistant to groups 2, 9, and 14. In Ontario, where they've had water hemp for longer, they have 5-way resistant um, water hemp, and of course resistant to groups 2, 4, 5, 9, 14, and 27. And in the United States, we have resistance to groups 2, 4, 5, 9, 14, 15, and 27. So, there's not a lot of modes of action or herbicides that are left when we start looking at that. And the more aggressive, of the two, Palmer amaranth, in the United States, you have resistance to group 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 10, 14, and 27. So, I mean, there's not really a lot of options for herbicides left to control them. So that's why we don't want them here, because once they become established, it's very hard to do anything else with them than to try to control them with the last herbicides that they are susceptible to, or you start using tillage or other means to control them. So a little bit about distinguishing characteristics. So I talked about plant hairiness a few slides ago. So they are smooth-stemmed plants. So we see here, we have a comparison here to redwood pigweed on the top left, Palmer amaranth on the top right. You see a very smooth stem, whereas redwood pigweed, a common weed here, we do see very much the hairs on the stem. Bottom right here, we see water hemp, again, a smooth stem. And then green pigweed or pal amaranth, we don't have that here. That's an Ontario weed. But you can see a very stark difference in how hairy the stem is. So if you're in the field and you're curious, normally that can be a quick indicator if it's potentially one of the invasive pigweeds, or maybe different weed species, depending if there's hairs present. The other one is their leaf size. And it's a lot harder to tell in the field, but this is kind of a close-up that I believe this came from Ontario as well, that they did, of Palmer amaranth, common water hemp, green pigweed, and redwood pigweed. As I mentioned before, Palmer amaranth will have a longer petiole than the leaf blade, and may sometimes have an indent in the tip, potentially with even a single hair there. So again, it is a little bit of a shorter, but a bit of a wider leaf, where water hemp, very much we have those elongated leaves. They're kind of narrower and longer compared to the other pigweeds. And of course, green pigweed and redwood pigweed, visually out in the field, they look very similar to all of them, but it can give you a bit of an idea as to how similar they are, but also maybe to telling them apart if you're doing a more closer comparison. Seed head morphology is very similar as well. So of course we have redwood pigweed here on the top left, Palmer amaranth on the top right. We have broken down into the male and the female parts of the seed head. I believe the female has little tiny bracts as well. You can use that to help differentiate the weed, but you have to really get in there and kind of start folding things back and breaking things off. Then of course we have the seed head of green pigweed or pal amaranth. And the bottom right, you have the seed head of water hemp. So, they look very similar from far away, even close up, but that gives you an idea of how easily they can be confused with the other pigweeds if you're not comfortable or not sure what you're looking for. So a little more about these weeds. So they're prolific seed producers. So water hemp and Palmer amaranth can produce up to 1 million seeds per plant. They're very small seeds, less than 1 millimeter in diameter. Quite a varying or medium to short dormancy. Majority would be 5 years, I think. Sorry, that's the longevity in the seed bank. A medium to short-term dormancy in the as well for them to be triggered to germinate, and very much a later growth with continuous germination, as they're more summer annual weeds, not our winter annual weeds. So they're going to be emerging a bit later, and they'll be emerging in June versus some of the other weeds that would maybe be emerging in when things warm up here in late April or May. They're very fast-growing weeds. They can put on a lot of growth very quickly. There's been some reports that herbicides are ineffective once they get past 10 centimeters or about 4 inches in height. Of course, they can easily be confused with other weeds or other weed species, that are less problematic, such as biannual wormwood, a lot of those dock or slough weeds, I like to call them, a lot of those dock species. The big one there, of course, as I mentioned, is they have a tremendous amount of genetic variability, which has contributed to how quickly they have developed herbicide resistance. And we're in a situation we are now with a few herbicides that are left that are effective on the weeds. So of course, what's important as well is their time to flowering. So a little bit about their biology that I got from Ontario there as well. Of course, their time of flowering is influenced by their emergent state. Plants emerging in May may take longer to flower versus plants emerging in August or September, which might flower a bit earlier. This is, of course, based on the growing conditions in Ontario, not here in Saskatchewan. They do have something called a pulse flowering pattern that I haven't seen yet. I'm not overly familiar with, but it sounds like that they can have up to 10 flowering pulses during the growing season, where they can be, multiple times that they're flowering or having these flowering pulses. So that can also be dictated by environmental conditions. So, the main thing there, of course, is to try to control them before they go to seed or start flower. Well, it's okay for them to start flowering. Once they go to seed or start dropping seeds, then you're in trouble, because if you're dropping 1 million seeds or 100,000 are viable, that's a lot in the seed bank to be dealing with. This is a little bit more in depth on some research about water hemp. So this research showed that they were finding up to 4.8 million seeds on a female plant. So even if a small percentage of that are viable, that's still a very large number of potential plants there that could be causing some issues with herbicide resistance and crop competition. Showing the importance of plant competition, because water hemp only produces 300,000 seeds per plant when it emerges at the same time as soybean, and 3,000 seeds per plant if it emerges about 50 days after soybean planting. So, if you're growing a crop that is competitive or semi-competitive, and if the crop gets a jump on the weeds, it can do a lot just with that competition to help, I want to use the word kind of shading the weed or helping to compete with it. And of course, crops and weeds, there's a lot of interaction, a lot of interface there that we don't see, but they're adjusting their growth and their how much they would reproduce for seeds based on, their competition and their potential for growth in the finished or life cycle, and based on, water, nutrient, and availability as well. So it's quite, when you get into their ecology and biology, it's quite interesting how plants can interact on that level that we just don't see just from the eye level when we're walking through a field or driving through a field. One positive, of course, is a relatively short seed longevity. They say viability up to 20 years, but for the most part, the vast majority would be germinating or degrading in less than 5 years. So it's one positive if if they do get established, if you could control the populations that are there or the seed bank, kind of 5 years of intense control or being on top of it could maybe drain that seed bank, and you're not letting other plants go to seed. So it's another one where, yes, that's scary, but there are ways to help get ahead of them as well. I'm going to say when they are found in the province, and then we have to deal with them on a very realistic basis, I guess. A little bit about their competitiveness. So they like to begin germination about 10 degrees Celsius when the soil is a bit warmer. They really grow at optimum temperature about 30 degrees Celsius. So typically a bit warmer than here. They really like that, the growing conditions in Ontario where it's hot and humid and they can really get growing quickly. Rapid growth rate up to 2.5 centimeters or an inch a day. And they can get up to more than 4 meters in height in those warm, humid climates, so like in southern Ontario or the United States. So typically on the prairies, more like 1.5 meters tall, maybe 4 or 5 feet tall. This comes out of Ontario here, where we have I believe it's a water hemp plant. This gentleman here, even if he's 5.5, 6 feet tall, that plant's about double his height. So I mean, you've got a 10-foot, 12-foot tall water hemp plant there. It's just turned into being a monster. But if you let that grow out in the field, I mean, none of our crops get anywhere near that tall. So it's able to grow above everything else and intercept some sunlight for photosynthesis. And I mean, if you think about it too, it's probably, we always have a rule of thumb that the root system is equivalent to kind of the above ground growth. So can you imagine how deep the root grows in that thing? Maybe not 10 feet, but it probably goes deeper than, say, our tap roots here, like canola, that might go down 3 or 4 feet. So very aggressive root system as well for intercepting water and nutrients. So, if you got a crop like wheat competing with that, it's very hard for it to compete with it if they're both growing at that height and at that size. But also, yield loss can be significant. Studies have shown an average yield loss of up to 19%. An average yield loss of 19% and up to 99% yield loss if you're, have a weaker competitive crop and a very good population of those weeds in the field. Research showed soybeans about a 43% average yield loss and up to about a 93% total yield loss. So realistically, when you're above a 90% yield loss, there's very little there left. And I mean, you're putting a lot of, if you're combining, you're putting a lot of weeds through the combine likely as well. So again, very easily confused with other pigweed species here. It's easily often mistaken, especially if they're at a smaller stage or they're seedling to maybe just getting into their growth where they're putting on some leaves. So here in this table here, or in this picture, we have water hemp, the seedling on the left, green pigweed, common weed in Ontario in the middle here. Then on the right is redwood pigweed. Again, at a seedling stage, very easy to be confused or not caught. When you start getting a little bit bigger, getting close to flowering again, very similar looking, but diving in a bit deeper might be able to tell them apart. But the main thing there as well is as they get a little bit more mature, you can start to differentiate from the hairs on the stems from redwood pigweed or green pigweed, and water hemp or Palmer amaranth have that very, very smooth stem. So that's a quick distinguishing feature. But the main one here, because we have a lot of producers, agronomists, people from the industry on the webinar, if you're suspecting or seeing anything, whether it's a pigweed, looking a bit different, or especially if it's surviving a herbicide application, I would really like it if you could call myself on my personal cell phone, as well as the Acknowledge Center, one of the other regional staff. The main thing there is, if you're seeing something and it's suspect, acting on it so we can at least get a proper ID, which might take a little bit of time, as I don't have a lot of experience with these weeds yet. But we need to get a proper ID. And then the big one is eradication. So, that's pulling them, getting rid of them as soon as possible, and then coming back and inspecting that site or that area where they have been discovered. See if they have any stragglers, and also if it's other parts or areas, where it might have been discovered, because we really don't want them to get established here or to get spreading, because it's going to be too hard to control them. And they also are prohibited weeds. We did add them as prohibited weeds under the Weed Control Act. That was finalized back in July. So weed inspectors as well can enact the Weed Control Act for a landowner that, that they're to be eradicated. No ifs, ands, or buts, because it's for really the goodness of the whole industry to not have them established here. So with that, I'm just going to got a few slides here on herbicide carryover going into 2026, kind of a little bit on the basics of herbicide carryover, then what we can expect as we get closer to spring and the air drills running. So a little bit of a review of the basics of herbicide carryover. So number one, herbicides require both soil moisture and temperature for breakdown. So the temperature is for the microbes in the soil to be active, right? I mean, in the winter right now, it's -20 outside. There's no microbial activity in the soil. And of course, we also need moisture for that to be taking place as well. Of course, microbial digestion is by far the vast majority of the method of herbicide breakdown, and a little bit by hydrolysis. So that's basically water cleaving a herbicide molecule in half and making it inactive, essentially. As I mentioned, of course, herbicide breakdown requires warm soils when we have those the microbes very active in the soil. Typically, the majority of herbicide breakdown will take place in June, July, and August, when we have the most activity, and typically, well, as long as you have moisture as well. I know we've had some very dry years where that's been lacking, where we've maybe had less herbicide breakdown. As well, you could see herbicide breakdown in May if you have warm temperatures and, of course, a little bit of moisture there. And even we had a really good fall, a longer fall, and warmer temperatures in some areas. We're receiving some rainfall, so definitely could have seen some rainfall into September or beginning of October there as well. but for the most part, expect it to be June, July, and August for the majority of breakdown. Of course, the impacts of herbicide carryover can be mediated by our higher clay and organic matter content. So if you're lucky to be in Regina heavy clay or have a higher organic matter content, a little more give and take there, because the clay organic matter can kind of bind up some of the herbicide and not have it available to be taken up by the crop or the weeds. As well, the pH of your soil can influence how the herbicide is binded to soils and how it can break down, especially by hydrolysis. So really quick overview of herbicide carryover, how it's broken down. And I'm just going to go over here in the last minute or two or whatever it takes for the herbicide carryover, the different risk maps that we're presenting as well that we've had. They're on the website. I've had them done since sometime in November. They've been available online. So 3 maps here that I'm going to show. The first map is based on our crop reporter rainfall from May 1st to September 30th. This is the risk for pre-seed herbicide applications across the province, and excuse me. Also, the legend here is in the top right, just the different amounts of rainfall that you would need for breakdown and maybe the different levels of carryover we might see from medium to high to moderate to extreme to none or to uncertain. For the most part, for our early applications there, for pre-seed herbicide applications, some moderate to high risk areas in the province of Pocket, north of Regina or Moose Jaw, and really some small pockets in northwest Saskatchewan that there's a high risk of some carryover in certain areas, but really overall across the province, it looks quite not too bad for carryover for early pre-seed herbicide applications. The second map here is based on rainfall data from June 1st to September 30th. This should be kind of the risk of herbicide carryover for early in-crop herbicide applications. For the most part on this map as well, we're really seeing the pockets that were from the previous map really expanding. So kind of Moose Jaw, Regina, that area, kind of moderate to high to very high does expand a little bit more. Some other pockets of moderate concern coming up, like near Weyburn, Melville, Indian Head, West Central Saskatchewan, RM 141, 142, and nearly a large area northwest Saskatchewan, whether it be northwest of North Battleford, Lloydminster, almost at Meadow Lake. There's quite a large area there that wasn't receiving much rainfall. And the risk for late in-crop herbicide applications, this is for our rainfall data based from June 15th to about September 30th. For the most part as well, across the province, not too bad. There's a lot of green there, but the pockets that I talked about before, they seem to be expanding a little bit more. So that area north of Regina or Moose Jaw, encompassing several RMs, is kind of getting moderate to high, expanding a little bit larger there, Melville, Indian Head areas, Weyburn, a little bit, of course, in West Central Saskatchewan there are RM 141, 142. Val-Marie has a little pocket area. And then, of course, northwest of Prince Albert, there's a few areas there. But the big one, of course, to be aware of is northwest Saskatchewan, where they had less rainfall than normal. There's a lot of areas there, north and west and northwest and North Battleford, Lloydminster, Meadow Lake areas. Quite a high risk in some areas for carryover. So something to be aware of when you're planning your crop rotations or your herbicide, what you're going to use, as well as if you see something going on in your crop that might look off and you're in one of these areas where there is a moderate to high risk, could be herbicide carryover as well, just to keep that in your mind when you're looking at fields this growing season. So with that, I will just leave my contact information up on the screen, and I think there's maybe a couple, 2, 3, 4 minutes for questions as well there, Rebecca.
Great, thank you very much, Cory. We have a couple questions here for you. Has Group 10 resistant water hemp been found anywhere?
Not that I'm aware of. I would never say, if it hasn't been found, not that I'm aware of, but I mean, it could still develop resistance to it. I mean, it's a little bit harder, I've always felt, for the contact herbicides to develop resistance, but it is possible. So I wouldn't, even if it's not out there, it's easy to develop resistance to it, I would say, especially for how much genetic variability those pigweeds have.
Will high soil moisture conditions this spring help with herbicide breakdown in the high-risk carryover pockets in the province?
They will. That's, to a point they will. It just depends how early we can get out in the fields, and of course how early the soils do warm up. So, I mean, if we have a really warm May and there is some rain there, it definitely could help with breakdown. So, I mean, by the time the crops really get growing and the roots start, searching and maybe finding some, some herbicide there, it could be end of May, beginning of June. So I think it could help to a degree, but it's going to depend on our conditions and our weather as well when we get out in the fields in the spring.
Great. That's all the questions we had. So thank you very much again, James, Alireza, and Cory, for all the great information. We appreciate the time you took to join us here today. I will now put up the QR code for the CCA